What's up, y'all? You're listening to the Extra Point College Football Podcast. I'm your host, Jacob Carnes, joined as always by my co-host, Daniel Hammock. Daniel, we have a very full slate on deck. So, starting with this episode, we record on Tuesday nights. So we're going to do a quick reaction to the new college football playoff rankings, which we will do on every preview episode for the rest of the season. Got to talk about it because it happens. So we'll do a quick hit on that. And then we have, I don't know if it's the biggest week for college football this year. It's definitely the biggest game for college football this year. So we got 7 big games we're going to talk about. Obviously, I'm going to go with the AP ranking just because it sounds better to say number 1 versus number 2. But, we have number 1 versus number 3 in the playoff ranking. 2 number 1s, really. So playing in Athens this Saturday, we're going to hit Washington, Oregon State, NC State, Wake Forest, Kansas State, Texas, Arkansas, Liberty, LSU, Bama, Notre Dame, Clemson, and lastly, Bryan Harsin was officially fired yesterday. We're going to get a quick reaction to that as well. A very full episode. Daniel, week 10, man, we get the best game of the year on Saturday.
We do. I'm very excited. It's just going to be, I think, with how the Tennessee-Alabama game was, obviously the expectation is this one's going to be just as good, competitive wise. So definitely exciting that, a team has resurged like Tennessee, where, they're always playing these big games, but now they're, a great matchup for it. So that's exciting.
Love it. Daniel, let's start with the first version of the 2022 college football playoff rankings were released tonight. It was the top 4. I'll get through the top 10. 1, Tennessee. 2, Ohio State. 3, Georgia. 4, Clemson. 5, Michigan. 6, Alabama. 7, TCU. 8, Oregon. 9, USC. 10, LSU. You're 10 and 2 LSU in the top 10.
They're ready.
Any big takeaways from this first version of the rankings?
Yeah, so obviously Tennessee, it's you kind of alluded that you expected Tennessee to be 1 when we previewed it, on our reaction pod a few days ago. I did think Georgia would still be number 1. But you were right on that. That's a little surprising to me. I did think if Georgia wasn't 1, that 3 was probably more likely rather than 2, because I do think that if they unseat Georgia, then I still think that Ohio State would have been 2. So it makes sense with how they went with it for at least those first 3. I was kind of surprised to see Alabama all the way down at 6, but how the committee is, and they like their unbeaten teams. So, Clemson and Michigan, I had, in my rankings, I had Clemson as number 6, Alabama is number 5, and I had Michigan 4. So, Michigan being number 5, that's a little shocking. They've been pretty in control of every game they've been in. So, yeah, I'm not really sure about that, but we'll see it play out over the next few weeks.
Yeah, if you're upset about the rankings, join the club. What I don't like about it, and it's been the same way for years, it's not going to change, is, this is essentially just an 8 people. It's 13 people's opinions. No computers involved. You and I, fans of the BCS, RIP, long live the BCS. But I don't like that they use logic for some rankings and then don't apply it elsewhere in the playoff rankings. So if they're like, hey, Michigan is 5 because of out of conference scheduling, basically like a week out of conference schedule. And so they're leaving them out of the top 4 and then not applying the same logic to the top 3 teams. It's just backwards. The good thing is I do think the committee has gotten the top 4 right every year. At the end of the season, they've gotten the top 4 right in the playoff. The BCS would have chosen the same top 4 every year of the playoffs so far. But I do think it's interesting to see what the BCS would have done tonight. And I'm with you. I think of the top 10, Clemson's the most overrated. I really don't see a team in the top 10, though, that I think doesn't belong in the top 10, which is a good thing. I think all top 10 teams, I'm like, okay, there's no one there that just sticks out that doesn't belong. But there's a great Twitter kind of follow, BCS, at BCS Know-How, and they'll post the simulated BCS, what the computers would have done this week. And the BCS this week would have had Georgia at 1, Ohio State 2, Tennessee 3, Michigan 4, which is exactly what you and I had in our, in our top 4. And then Clemson at 5, Alabama 6, TCU 7, Oregon 8, USC 9, Ole Miss 10. So only difference in the top 10 being LSU. But you and I fans of the BCS, but just interesting to look at to see what the computers would have done. And top 4 would have looked a good bit different, other than Ohio State staying at 2. So we'll keep an eye on this throughout. It's interesting because I was going to say it's interesting now, but to see where their head's at, to see how they decide things later. But to be completely honest, they're going to change where they do it later. So the same logic they use to do these rankings won't necessarily apply here in 4 weeks. So
which is just
really
killing you
doesn't matter.
under the surface. It's like, what are you doing here? But
it's killing me. I'm numb to it now. This is what, year 8 that we're doing this.
You expect
it.
it.
It's just like, this is gonna be dumb. We're gonna get the top 4 teams. That's fine. It's just how we get there is annoying.
Yeah,
that's the result's great. I think how we get there is really annoying. So, but the rankings, if you're mad about them, I'm sorry. I think we all agree. No one is happy with the rankings ever.
Well, I think Tennessee fans are happy.
Tennessee fans are happy.
I'll say that because they've waited their turn, and for the first rankings this year to just come straight out with number 1, I think you probably got a lot of them happy. You might have coaches that are upset because they probably may have wanted to be, lower so that they can be the underdog. But you know what? It's heavy is the head that wears the crown. So we'll see. This is exciting.
Daniel, before we get to, and we're going to start with Georgia, Tennessee. That is the game of the year so far in college football. Before we get there, real quick, what is a game that we're not talking about that you're excited to watch on Saturday?
Well, Jacob, did
I surprise you with the question?
You surprise me with the question that you ask me every single week that I should be ready for. So in conclusion, you go ahead and go, because I had 2 earlier and I just completely forgot them. So you go, and I'm sure that I'll have it by the time.
I'll give you an underrated one, and then I think a pretty good game. Tulane and Tulsa. Tulane goes on the roll to Tulsa this week. Tulane debuted at number 19 in the playoff rankings. Tulane 7-1. And again, this is the Tulane team that handed Kansas State one of their 2 losses. So I have Tulane in the top 15 in my own rankings, just because I got to apply that logic. They have a better record and they beat them head to head. So Tulane, that'll be a good test for them with Tulsa on the road. So that's an underrated game at noon. And then I'll go to the SEC, Florida and Texas A&M being played at noon on Saturday. Both teams kind of reeling after several conference losses. So, one coaching staff that's at least there for the long haul are going to get paid $85 million. And then a brand new coaching staff who kind of has the edge there. It's like a 3-point line at Texas A&M. So excited for that one.
Yeah, so I remember what I was going to say, and it was the one that I had texted you, hey, should we be talking about this game? And you said, or actually, I think my phrase was, any interest in this game? And you said, haha, no. And I don't think that anything could be explained better than how my anticipation of this game, which it's Florida State, Miami. And you know what, Jacob? It's a shame, because this game,
in prime time.
It's a great rivalry. It's in prime time, but it's Miami's fault. And you said it in the text message. You said it's Miami's fault. Florida State has, to this point, held up their end of being a competitive, good football team. Their rebuild is taking it's doing well. And Miami, the games that they have lost this year, Jacob, have not been, they lost to this better team. They've been losing to some teams that are what some would consider have been layups, and they should have won these games. One of them being Middle Tennessee State, and then Duke. So we're not going to feel sorry for Miami. That being said, Florida State, Miami, tons of tradition, tons of history. So yes, of course, I'm going to keep an eye on it for historical purposes.
It's in prime time.
And it's gotten coaches fired in recent years. So, it's one of those where you got Norvell, who's in year 3. Is this year 3 or year 4? This is year 3. He started in 2020.
Yes.
Yeah, he was
No.
one of the 2020
Yes.
hires. Yeah.
Yes.
So this is year 3. Year 3 of a rebuild, looking like they're on track. Looking like they're on track so far. You and I, big Norvell guys, as soon as he got hired, we said, just stick with him. It'll work. We
Write
were
it
out
out.
on Taggart from the hiring of Taggart. We were out on him. And then we were in on Norvell. So we're expecting big things. We like the Cristobal hire as far as when it first happened with Miami. Interesting to see that flashy hire if he's able to pull some sort of magic. If he does, it could stunt the growth of Florida State with this, the momentum that they have from having a good season so far. If Florida State wins, I think the train keeps rolling and their rebuild is almost in the restored space. So we'll see how that goes. Anyways, I've spent way too much time talking about that dud of a game when we have the stud of a game that we're about to talk about. Jacob, set the table.
We're going to give this plenty of airtime. In the history of the AP poll, there have only been 25 meetings of number 1 versus number 2 in the regular season. Since 2000, so in this millennium, this is the 5th matchup of the AP number 1 versus the AP number 2. History of 1s versus 2s in the regular season: 2006, Ohio State 24, Texas 7. That was like early in the season, coming off of a couple of great years of Ohio State and a team that would go on to play for the national championship that same year, 2006. Number 1 Ohio State versus number 2 Michigan at the end of the season. Ohio State won that game 42-39. And again, that team would go on to lose the national championship to Florida that year. 2011, I'm sure a lot of people listening to this podcast remember this game. It was dubbed the game of the century. LSU 9, Alabama 6 in overtime. Number 1 LSU defeats Alabama, and famously, Alabama would go on to beat LSU in a rematch in the national championship game that year. And then most recently, people forget this one because the playoff rankings were different. 2019 was actually number 1 LSU in the AP poll versus number 2 Alabama in the AP poll. LSU went on to win that game 46-41. So these do not happen often. And except for that 2006 game where we got a blowout, they tend to be classics. We are getting number 1 versus number 2 in Athens on Saturday, 3:30, CBS. Daniel, where are you going in Athens?
This game is much anticipated. We've been looking at it for a couple weeks ever since Tennessee took down the Tide. And it's been one of those of, all right, what's the next big one for Tennessee? And of course, it was Georgia. Georgia running through their schedule. We looked at it at the beginning of the year. We said, okay, if they get past Oregon, I don't know if there's another team that really challenges them. And we didn't really look at Tennessee at that time. As the season has been progressing, Tennessee has looked like, a team and a program that has taken a step forward from last year. Already they were a phenomenal offense last year. They seem to be a better overall team this year. Just watching how this plays out, I do think that crowd will be very impactful, for Georgia. I think they're going to have to be. I think the pace that Tennessee plays with will be an issue potentially for the crowd to be, a big deal for a long period of time. So we'll see how that plays out. But I just think Georgia is still one of the most complete teams in the country. And by one of the most, I mean the most complete team in the country. I think that offense and defense being complementary. I think that when Georgia has shown that they need to flip the switch and just be, in killer instinct mode, they've been able to do that. And I just trust them in this game at home. So all of those things together, I'm going to keep coming back to this. I think anytime we break down a Georgia game, this offensive line is special. I think there's been times this year where they have given some things up that, but I think that they have matured and grown over the course of this year. And it's in run and pass block sets. They're not just a one-dimensional offensive line. I think that that's going to be the difference in this game. I think that Georgia will be able to – they'll control the clock for whatever that means, because I do think Tennessee, if they score quickly. I'm not saying if they score like they're going to be shut out or anything like that. I think Tennessee gets in the end zone a few times. I just don't know if Tennessee's defense can hold up against Georgia's offense. I could see it being tight, and maybe even the first drive of each team not producing points, perhaps, and it being something weird, like we're expecting this blowout or this shootout, and then something like that happens. But these teams will start to score and they'll settle in. I just think Georgia is going to be able to hold them off. And looking at the spread, we got it at 8.5. So, I mean, a 10-point Georgia win doesn't sound out of the, I feel very comfortable there. I think it's going to be more like 2 touchdowns, but I mean, Tennessee, phenomenal point to this part. They absolutely could just win this game outright. They're number 1 in the college football playoff rankings for a reason. I just think that, I heard a ranking on the radio today, local in Atlanta. So, take it for what it's worth, but ranking the units on the field. And it was Tennessee's offense is number 1. Georgia's offense is number 2. Georgia's defense is number 3. And Tennessee's defense is number 5 after a big empty gap in the middle. And to me, that's I think that, Georgia's offense is closer to Tennessee's offense than Tennessee's defense is going to be to Georgia's defense. So all that put together, mixed in a pot with, 90,000 fans being on Georgia's side. I'm going to take the dogs. I'm going to lay the 8.5.
I'm going to give this game plenty of air to breathe. So obviously I love statistics. So I did a deep dive for this game just because, hey, we don't, these matchups don't happen often. So a lot of comparisons have been made between this year's Tennessee team and 2019 LSU. And I get it. I think it's coming off of a, promising, but not a great year, good year. Come in, just like boom, explosive offense, Heisman contender at quarterback. Like offense is scoring 50 a game and defense is doing just enough. Does it even matter? They're going to outscore everybody. I think Tennessee could be that team. We're going to know after this week because, again, that LSU team went into Tuscaloosa in week 10 in 2019 and won in a shootout. And that was when they got to supplant themselves as, hey, we're here, we're for real. Now, Tennessee's already beaten Alabama, but now they get to take on the defending champions. Now they get to go on the road to Athens and see, are they this year's version of that team? And I don't like to throw that comparison out lightly because I think LSU 2019 might be the greatest team of all time. So I don't think Tennessee's in that area yet, but I get the comparison. Georgia started out the season beating Oregon 49-3. They've struggled at times, and they've looked like a clear number 1 team in the country other times during this season. So a little bit inconsistent. I think Tennessee has been consistent in that they've been the story of the season. They're 8-0. They beat Alabama. They have an explosive and a fun offense that everyone loves watching. So matchups, right? Tennessee's offense versus Georgia's defense. Tennessee has not played a defense like Georgia's defense, and vice versa. Georgia's defense has not seen an offense like Tennessee's offense yet. So again, a true test for both teams. I do think Tennessee's going to score points. How those points come will be the story of this game. So one elite thing that both teams do is finishing drives. Georgia is the best in the country at stopping teams from scoring points once they get in scoring territory. So when you cross the 40, and this is modern college football defense, the team last year did this too. We'll let you get yards, but once we start getting backed up, like now we're in our strength. Like now we don't have to cover as much. We're not going to let you get over the top. We'll let you get down here, and now you're going to earn it, in the red zone. But Tennessee's very good at finishing drives in that area. So that's a fun matchup. I'm very excited to watch. How does Tennessee score? Are they scoring touchdowns, or are they getting down there and kicking field goals? Alabama played a lot of zone defense against Tennessee, which they don't normally do. And I think that caused, number one, we saw it in the first half. Jalen Hyatt had a mismatch the whole first half, and Tennessee saw it and they capitalized on it. I think you're going to see Georgia play a lot of man. I think they saw Alabama switch from their normal set and get burned. Alabama made an adjustment in the second half, and the defense played a lot better in the second half. Alabama actually came back from down a few scores in that second half. Georgia, I think they're going to play some man here. I think playing man, you're going to give up a couple of explosive plays, but I think do what you do well. Don't try to change it up for one offense, right? Limit scoring when they cross the 40. That's Georgia's key to limit Tennessee here. Georgia's offense versus Tennessee's defense. I think this is where we find a mismatch in this game. And this is why Georgia opened as an 11.5-point favorite. Georgia's offense is the most efficient offense in the country. They're not running 3 plays a minute. They're not throwing 70-yard bombs like Tennessee is. The receivers aren't lining up on the sideline, but they are efficient at what they do. They drive down the field bit by bit and then finish drives and they score. They've got a versatile set of weapons. The pass offense is super efficient, and Tennessee's pass defense is not at all. It's one of the biggest mismatches. Georgia ranks 13th in the country in EPA per pass. Tennessee's defense is 103rd in the country in EPA given up per pass. And like we talked about with Tennessee finishing drives, Georgia is one of the best teams in the country at finishing drives. Tennessee's defense, 95th in the same category. And I think that is where Georgia's offense is going to score. So people keep saying like, oh, can Georgia handle Tennessee in a shutout? I think the question needs to be asked, can Tennessee's offense go score for score against Georgia's defense? Because I think Georgia will be able to score at will. So long as, caveat here, number 13 still playing quarterback. And he's bound to throw a couple YOLO balls. He did it against Florida. He paid for it against Florida. You don't want to do that against Tennessee. You give Tennessee a couple extra possessions, that's not good. Now, both of these teams are top 3 in the country in points per drive. So again, I think points are misleading here because Georgia takes more time to score because they don't play as fast. But both teams are scoring almost the same exact number of points per drive down the field. So again, you can't give Tennessee more drives by giving them free possessions. You mentioned it. When Georgia has needed to flip the switch, they have. They are the best team in the SEC on 3rd and 4th down. In a tight game like this, I think that matters. I think they have an advantage on both sides of the line of scrimmage. Georgia does in this game. And Tennessee has been a phenomenal story this year. I think when you go on the road and play in Athens, again, if you come at the Kings, you better not miss. And I think Tennessee can win this game outright. I think there's a scenario where Georgia turns the ball over twice and Tennessee wins by 2 scores. I think you're going to see the best version of Georgia on Saturday. And I don't think Tennessee can beat the best version of Georgia. And I don't think they can cover against the best version of Georgia either. So I'm going to take Georgia to win. I'm going to take Georgia to cover. I'll even give you a score here, Daniel. 45-30. I think Georgia wins by 2 scores, which will get us that cover at 8.5. So last little fun fact, Georgia is 1-9 in games where their opponent scores 30-plus points. But they are also 27-1 when Georgia scores 30-plus points. So be interesting to see if both teams get above 30. One of those trends will be true and one of them will not. So I like the dogs to win. I like the dogs to cover. That was a long time for one game, but again, these games don't come very often. So need to be talked about. All right. That's the big one. Let's keep going, Daniel, because there's more than one game going on this week. Friday night, little Pac-12 after dark, Washington hosting Oregon State. Washington, a 4.5-point favorite. Where are you going in Seattle?
Yeah, so a couple of things. With it being a Pac-12 game on a Friday night, my decision has been to go with the opposite team that I would pick in this spot. So I'm going to see if this works. I would be picking Oregon State. I think they're better. I think that they get points on the road. I think that they should win this game. I'm picking Washington to cover. It's a 4.5-point spread. Washington's favored. I am taking Washington, even though I think that Oregon State's going to win. It's the only logic I can give to a Friday night Pac-12 game. So there you go.
I'm not even kidding. I wrote down the same thing, except I did a different result. So I just put weird things happen on Friday nights in Pac-12 after dark. And so I'll take the Friday night Pac-12 underdog. So same principle of weird things happen on
Very
Friday
fair.
night.
Yeah.
So I'll take the points because weird things happen in the Pac-12. Outside of that, I would have done that no matter who the teams were. But principal play here, man, my Beavers.
Yeah.
We know who the top 5 teams, excuse me, we know who the top 4 teams in the Pac-12 are. This is the battle for 5th place. So, but yeah, it's a Friday night in the Pac-12. Take the underdog. That's yeah. Completely understand your logic. Great pick. Best of luck to you. Can't wait to watch it.
Yeah.
Easy. Moving on. That's awesome. We did not talk about this pre-show, so
No,
that's
don't.
hilarious. All right, go to the ACC. NC State hosting Wake Forest. Wake Forest coming in on the road. That sounded real Southern. On the road as a 4.5 point favorite. Where are you going in Raleigh?
Yeah, this one coming off last week, NC State with the close win over Virginia Tech on a Thursday night, a 1-point victory. And then Wake Forest just having that ugly, weird game against Louisville. I look for Wake to get back on track here. I think they'll have a tough time with the NC State defense. Like, I don't think it's just going to be an easy game. That being said, over the course of the game, I just trust this Dave Clawson offense to continue to stress the defense, and they will, put points up on the board. And I'm just going to trust that. Unfortunately, NC State, they have to manufacture a lot more with Devin Leary being out. So they're not as efficient as they were before on the offensive side of the ball. It's caused me to just, hey, I'll just take more of the known here, and I'll take Wake Forest. It's less than a touchdown, so I feel confident that they'll win by touchdown or more. So give me Wake, lay the points.
It's a weird game, Daniel. The line's weird.
It's weird.
Weird line. Again, Wake. If you take out last week's game, I think you'd lay the points with Wake Forest in a heartbeat.
Mm-hmm.
Like easy. And then last week, it's like, oh, okay, well, 4.5 makes a little bit of sense after last week. I don't think Wake has a crazy 8 turnover game again. If they do, I mean, write it down in the record books. That's got to be a record to have back-to-back 8 turnover games. But I'm also like, when is that going to happen again? Where this has happened to Sam Hartman a few times in his career, is he has just like had a weird turnover game,
a meltdown,
and but it all happens in one game, but it's happened a few times. So against a team that I think has better talent, especially defensively, I'm just going to take points and hide. Home dog. I know the quarterback situation is rough. They were able to get a tough win last week. They also have extra rest. They played on Thursday last week, so they've had extra time to prep for this offense. I think Wake Forest wins in a very, very close game, rivalry game. These schools are only like 30 miles apart to Winston-Salem. So
that's the whole ACC, brother.
I mean, at least 4 of them.
They're all
4 of these teams.
Apart.
That's right. So I'll take the points. I'll take NC State at home plus 4.5. I think Wake Forest wins, but this is a weird game. So give me points in this game. All right, Big 12, Kansas State and Texas. Both teams still very alive in the Big 12 championship hunt. Texas needs a little bit of help, which would include a win this Saturday to stay in the hunt for the Big 12 championship. Texas on the road as a 2.5 point favorite. Where are you going in Manhattan?
This one feels weird because of how last week went for Kansas State. I think, if Kansas State would have lost that game last week, I'd probably be inclined to pick them this week. That being said, I'm taking Texas. It's only 2.5 point spread. Basically, if I believe Texas is going to win this game, I think they're going to cover. And so I like Texas to come in here, and we've talked about this principle just in general with the Big 12, just how many good teams there are. and it's which one gets hot, which one has the better day. And it's like none of those points from last week that Kansas State scored roll over.
That's right.
So it will be 0-0 to start this game. And I think Texas has the better team. I will say that this is a very good matchup for Texas on the lines of scrimmage, because I think that Kansas State is one of the better line of scrimmage teams in the Big 12. So that's something that it's going to be a key to watch, see how physical of a game this is. But I really like Texas's balance. Along with Kansas State, I think Kansas State you're going to have two very balanced offensive attacks. You're going to have, really smash mouth ball on offense and defense for both teams. I just think Texas has a little bit more. And, like I said, I think the whole idea, I'm not saying Kansas State is physically, consciously thinking, wow, we just dominated this team and we scored all these points. We're just going to score all these points again. I do think that there's a certain, subconscious that sneaks in and makes you think we're just going to be able to do this against anybody. And Texas's defense is better than Oklahoma State's defense. And, like I said, it's going to be a fresh game that they're going to have to go out there and game plan and score against, a new 11 out there. So give me Texas cover, lay the 2.5.
I'm also taking Texas here. I feel like a lot of the money is going to be on Kansas State after watching them last week. Texas is coming off of a bye week. So they get the bye. Texas was very highly rated in power ratings prior to the Oklahoma State game. And then after the game, still very highly rated by a lot of power ratings. Again, Oklahoma State on paper did not dominate that game. Even the scoreboard would tell you they didn't dominate the game, but Oklahoma State had it coming. Kansas State jumped on them while they're in the right spot there. Texas, super efficient, still one of the best teams in the country as far as their success rate goes on offense. Their net success rate, top 10 in the country still. So very efficient on both sides of the ball. This is a game where you get strength on strength and kind of weakness on weakness. So Texas's pass offense against Kansas State's pass defense is good on good. And then not that Texas is a bad rush offense or that Kansas State has a bad rush defense, but definitely not the strength of either one of those position groups. I think where this game is won is Kansas State's offensive line has played great. This is a team that has to run the ball to win, not wants to run the ball to win. They have to run the ball to win. And I think Texas is going to be able to make Kansas State one-dimensional. And if that's the case, do I trust Adrian Martinez to win a game through the air? And not when you got to get score for score with Quinn. I don't. So I'll take Texas. I'll lay the points on the road, and Texas continues to get their chance to get to the Big 12 championship.
Is Martinez back for this game?
Oh my goodness. Will Howard. Yeah, I have no idea. I didn't even think about it until just now. Still. Yeah, this offense has to run the ball.
They need to
be
run.
successful.
Yeah, I agree.
So I'll take Texas. I will lay the points. Let's go back to the SEC, Daniel. Arkansas, which we talked about before the season, had probably the toughest schedule in the country. With out of conference in the same season, they decided to schedule Cincinnati, BYU, and Liberty for some reason.
I don't know why they thought that.
Don't know why either when you play in the SEC West. But Arkansas hosting Liberty. Liberty only has one loss. Were they ranked in the playoff committee's rankings? I'm looking. But they are 13.5-point favorites against Liberty. Trying to talk slow while I look. And no, they weren't. Okay. So unranked Liberty still 13.5-point favorites at home. Where are you going in Fayetteville?
Yeah, it's 13.5 points. That's important because less than 2 touchdowns. I think that Arkansas needs this win to kind of get their season turned back right, get them feeling good about, just overall trajectory. They had a really good year last year. This year has not been what they were planning, but at the same time, I still wouldn't call it a disappointment. And then, obviously, taking care of business last week. I'm going to say that Arkansas takes care of Liberty. They're at home. I think they win by 2 scores. I don't think that's crazy to, I feel confident that they're in that spot. Hugh Freeze does know his way around the SEC West. That being said, um, I like KJ Jefferson in this offense to really just continue to put up points, even if Liberty scores a little bit. I think that you're going to have a healthy amount of points on the Arkansas side to get the cover. So give me Arkansas, lay the 13.5.
Who's the best team Liberty's played? Wake Forest, who they lost to. By 1, I might add. But, I mean, is it Southern Miss, who they beat in overtime? UAB by a touchdown? Akron by 9? Old Dominion by 14? UMass, who they killed? UMass. Gardner-Webb by 1? BYU, whose defense is terrible. They beat him pretty bad last week. They've not seen a team like Arkansas. Arkansas is getting healthy, finally. A healthy Arkansas team is going to win by at least 2 touchdowns. I think this one could get ugly. They do not have the guys up front to attempt to stop the run that Arkansas is going to force them to do on Saturday. I think Arkansas could throw 10 passes and win this game by 2 touchdowns. So I like Arkansas. I like them to cover. I like them to win big. So give me Arkansas. I will stay in the SEC. Sorry for the curveball. I went out of order. LSU.
You're good. I thought you were saving it for the last one or something, because this is the second biggest game of the day.
It is. You've got 2 de facto. This is why I don't want to expand the playoff. It's happening, but this is a playoff game for both teams. I mean, this is a semifinal for the conference. Like, You've got Georgia and Tennessee for the East, Alabama and LSU in the West. So LSU hosting Alabama in what has been a great series of games, especially the last decade, produced some classics. We talked about 2 of them, but Alabama coming in as 12.5-point favorites Saturday night in Death Valley. Where are you going in Baton Rouge?
Got to, my friend. Got to. 10-2 LSU. They're number 10 now in the college football playoff rankings. They're going to go 10-2. I'm willing it to happen. So, yes, that is me saying that LSU is going to win this game outright against Alabama. Do I really believe that? I don't have to, because they get 12.5 on the spread. But I sure would like to be right from the beginning of the season when I outlandishly declared that LSU would be 10-2. On the real, this game, I do like Alabama to have a good bounce back, but they're going into Death Valley where they are hated, and it's at night, where it will be dark and the lights will be bright and the crowd will be loud, as they always are. And it's just going to be hyped. They're going to have to do it. And I expect LSU's offense to continue their trajectory that they've had the past couple weeks and be able to score. I don't think that they're going to just like run Alabama out of the stadium or anything like that. As far as offense versus their defense, I do think that Alabama is going to have their way and score as well. That being said, I think this is a closer game than 12.5. I see a path for LSU to win this game. I say that's a lot less likely than, my whole declaration of 10-2 LSU. But there's a path for LSU to win this game outright. But I do think it's more likely, the most likely scenario in this game is Alabama escaping with a narrow win in Death Valley. And if that's the case, then I'm going to take these 12.5 points with my 10-2 LSU Tigers. And I'll keep saying 10-2 until there's no possibility of them going 10-2. So,
which could be this week.
Could be this week. I can't hear it, Jacob.
Well,
yeah. Now I can.
It's the best fight song in college football. Yeah, man. Give me LSU. I've been dying to pick with you with LSU here.
Yes.
So, dude, the sun has made its home in the western sky, and it's going to be Saturday night in Death Valley. Goosebumps, man. I just, there's nothing better in college football. There's a lot of great things in college football. One of the best things in college football is Alabama at LSU Saturday night in Death Valley. It's hard to beat. Yeah, I think Alabama wins this game. I think it's a 10-point game. So Bama's the better team. Bama's better on offense and defense. LSU's got some dudes on defense. And I think playing a guy like Harold Perkins, where they had to come back and beat Ole Miss, getting like he is a difference maker in a game like this. They've got the defensive line to get pressure where they can drop, 7 DBs into coverage and get pressure with 4. They've week after week gotten better and better and bought into the way Brian Kelly's doing things. And I don't think they win, but I do think they make this game fun for a long time. And I think Bama scores late. Bama's the better team. They've got Bryce Young. I think Bryce Young is the best player in the country. That's not like some hot take. He won the Heisman. I get it. I just still, every time I watch him play, I'm blown away with what I'm watching. He's so fun to watch. He's so calm. He always puts the ball in the right spot. He just finds guys open. He extends plays. Like the moment's never too big for him. And then I think this will be a close game on the road. Man, there's no better quarterback that I trust than Bryce Young. I just don't think they're going to cover. Alabama's defense this year they have not lived up to expectation. They've not proven that they can go shut down a good offense. So if that's the case, I think 12.5 is a tick too much. And I like Bama by 10. So give me LSU plus the points in Baton Rouge. And for your sake, I hope they win. 10-2 LSU.
There you
go. All right. Lastly, we got this game in 2020. Clemson at Notre Dame. And in that game, DJ Uyunglele went on the road, threw for over 400 yards. Clemson comes in as 4.5-point favorites on the road. Does a similar thing happen this Saturday night? Where are you going in? Oh gosh, what's the city? Notre Dame. I'm
South
blanking.
Bend.
South Bend. Thank you.
Not to be confused with North Bend, which doesn't exist.
Not North Bend.
Yeah.
No. So, not even close to North Bend.
South side of the Bend. No, with this game, Clemson, they're going to have the best unit on the field with their defense. And as much as I want to take that momentum that they got from beating Syracuse last week, and then, you do the comparison of, what it was like for, Syracuse and Clemson. Transitive property always works.
100% of the time.
I look at those things and I really want to kind of bet on Notre Dame at home. They get 4.5 points. But what I'm not going to do is bet against this defense with Clemson, because I think that the defense is going to travel. And I think that while the crowd may help Notre Dame stay in it, and I don't think that Clemson's going to run away with their offense isn't just going to run up and down on Notre Dame. I think there will be points scored. It'll be mostly in the second half. I think Clemson can do something more consistently on offense against Notre Dame's defense than I think that Notre Dame can do something consistently on offense against Clemson's defense, if that makes sense. I think that it's just going to be, it's going to be tough for Notre Dame to continuously attack this Clemson defense because I don't really believe in Notre Dame's offense. Now, the flip side, I think Clemson will struggle, like I said, offensively to a certain extent because Notre Dame will limit them. But by and large, I see this game probably being like a, 35-17 kind of game with Clemson winning. It might even just be like 28-17 where it's not even that high of a score, but that's plenty enough to cover. So, yeah, give me Clemson, lay the points.
I'm with you. I'm taking Clemson. I think there's a chance. Not that he throws for 400 yards. I'm rooting for a DJU get right game. So last time we saw DJ got benched against Syracuse. Clemson goes on to win. After the game, I thought he was incredibly mature. I thought Kay was very mature. I thought Dabo said the right things and said, like, hey, he had a bad day. DJ's still our quarterback. I think they meant that. DJ said he made the right call. He's got 120 players to take care of, not just him. I think this is a game where DJ can come back after the bye week and just show that he's still QB1 against this Notre Dame defense. Notre Dame not been great or efficient against the run this year. And so I think Clemson, if they call this game right, they can use a lot of Shipley early on, run a lot of zones with getting DJ to run the ball too, which then opens up their passing game. When you get DJ rolling out a little bit out of the pocket, get him clear space, like to make these throws, let routes develop, I think you go with that game plan, you can win this game by at least a touchdown. Because I'm with you. I think best unit on the field is Clemson's defense, and Notre Dame's not going to be able to do what they did last week to Syracuse against Clemson. So I'm with you. I like a 31-24 kind of game here, which will be a fun game here on Saturday night. So I like Clemson to win. I like Clemson to cover. Daniel, before we get out of here, yesterday Auburn officially fired Bryan Harsin after hiring their new athletic director, John Cohen from Mississippi State. Any quick thoughts on Harsin, Auburn, where they go from here, etc.?
Yeah, for me, it's we kind of get to put the Harsin thing to bed.
Finally,
it's been the worst kept secret since last year. They wanted to have, I guess, some reason to do it this year. I guess they found enough reason to finally pull the trigger and do it. I do think that it was, looking back, we at the hire, we didn't really understand it, but we were both kind of like energized in the moment of, hey, they just went off the beaten path. Well, this next hire, they have to get right. Which Gus Malzahn was a correct hire for the time, and that was a right hire.
Yes.
He had a good tenure. It was good.
Beat Nick Saban three times.
Exactly. So that being said, you can't have back-to-back bad hires at a big school at a good, school like this. I'm interested to see, the pool of names, the hints we've gotten and heard so far from, the shadows have been Lane Kiffin. Some pictures surface of Lane Kiffin with his arm around Bruce Pearl, things like that to kind of hint their way in. And then obviously people are going to keep bringing up Deion Sanders' name. So we'll see. When he was asked about it on Saturday on College Game Day, he didn't just say, "Oh, I'm staying at Jackson State forever." He said, "We'll cross those bridges when we come to them." So, kind of an answer that you would expect from someone who's trying to be honest about their pursuit of a bigger job. Auburn would be that. So those are kind of the two names that I've heard. Maybe potentially throw in a Matt Rule, who just was fired from Carolina Panthers. Got a little stink on him in the NFL, but man, he's still real pretty in college football. So, we'll see. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, we knew this was coming. The worst kept secret in college football was that Bryan Harsin was going to eventually be fired this year. I wanted to mention two things. One, his press release from himself. I hate when people do this. He said, "We did things the right way." Daniel, if I wanted to clean my office, and my way of cleaning it was to throw everything in the middle of the room and then clean it. And you're like, no. The right way is this. And you do it nice and neat or whatever, but you don't get the job done. Whose way was better? And I got the job done. Mine was better. I finished the job. You didn't do things the right way. Dude, you literally went 3-12 against FBS opponents. That's not the right way. It's not. It doesn't matter what you did. You went 3-12 against FBS opponents. Horrible. Anyway, he deserved to be fired. Auburn should have never hired him in the first place. You and I said that. Whenever they hired him, bad hire. You don't go get some Mountain West guy and hope it works. Boise State got worse under him. We said the same thing about Josh Heupel, but doesn't matter. We're 1-1. That's 500. Names to look out for. Yeah, I've heard the ones you've mentioned. I've heard Jeff Grimes. I've heard Hugh Freeze. I want to ask you this question too, Daniel. If I'm Auburn, my short list of 3 is 1, you make Lane Kiffin say no. You go get him a raise at Ole Miss if he says no. I mean, honestly, my list is two, Daniel. It's Lane Kiffin, and then I go to Del McGee. And I know you're going to say the same name probably. You and I are both very high on Del McGee. It's that Sam Pittman-esque, like he's been an assistant coach and an assistant head coach now for a little while. Incredible recruiter, especially for his position. Big culture guy. They made a big deal this week that, Cadillac Williams, interim head coach at Auburn, is the first black head coach at Auburn ever. So I think Del McGee being a head coach at Auburn, he's an Auburn guy, would be really cool for that as well. With the amount of black athletes that play at Auburn, I think that'd be really special. I think it's special that Cadillac's getting to do this season. Being an Auburn legend himself. I do think if I'm Auburn, he's going to get an interview, and I think they should interview him.
Right.
Arkansas interviewed him, but I think it's the SEC. Like they're going to compare notes. He's going to ask Arkansas, like, "Hey, why didn't you hire Deion?" And maybe there was just, "Hey, we like Pittman better." Maybe there was something there. I don't know, because Harsin came in with no SEC experience. Typically, schools swing the pendulum the other way, and so I think they're going to hire someone that is an SEC guy. And I think Lane Kiffin fits that mold. I think Hugh Freeze fits that mold. Del McGee fits that mold. So that's my list. That's what I think they're going to do. Well, who would be on your short list if you're Auburn?
Yeah, if I was short list, Kiffin, you've got to explore it. If he's any interest in moving up, and then we've actually said it just kind of quietly for a couple of years. Del McGee, running back coach at Georgia, but like you mentioned, assistant head coach. If Kirby Smart, for whatever reason, is ever not in the building, that's usually probably something to do with recruiting. The guy calling shots is Del McGee, and has been that way for a few years now. He's great organizationally, but he's great. Recruiting, which is lifeblood of what you've got to do. Like you mentioned, he is Auburn dude, played at Auburn, but he was a high school coach in Columbus, Georgia, and that's as Josh Pate talks about all the time. But it's the marriage between the state of Georgia and the state of Alabama. It's right there on the border. You get a lot of talent in those areas surrounding it. I think he would swing a big stick in that area. He'd carry a lot of weight to the recruiting game, which is ultra important. I also think that him being an Auburn guy might do well with the boosters. I think you either have to have someone like that's an Auburn guy that's trusted for the boosters, or you have to have one of the biggest fish out there, which would be Lane Kiffin or potentially Deion, something like that. I don't think that Hugh Freeze is in because the contract he just signed again. So
now I did hear someone say with that, who was it? It might have been McElwain at Colorado State or Tucker at Colorado. That basically both parties knew they were going to leave. And so as a favor, he basically got the school some money. I think it was Colorado State built their indoor with the contract buyout that the new school, I think when Florida hired McElwain, it was something like that, where basically they gave him an extension and he was like, "I'm going to get y'all some money." And then the new school came in and said, whatever, we don't even care. Anyway, I don't know if it'll be Freeze, but I don't think that matters. And if they want Freeze, that could be what Freeze is doing right now.
Gotcha. That's interesting. Yeah. If it's my short list, it's gonna be Kiffin and Del McGee. I'm trying to think if there's somebody else that's just blatantly obvious.
I got a third I didn't mention that would be obvious.
Go ahead.
Mark Stoops.
Yeah. Make him tell you no.
Absolutely. Dude, he's doing that at Kentucky. You give him Auburn resources. Look, I know the booster situation is insane, and people have told Auburn no. If you were to get alignment, this is a school. It's one of the few schools that can win a national championship. You're not going to do that at Kentucky. These coaches are different animals, man. I know Mark Stoops has the best coaching contract in college football, but I'm sure he wants to win.
He would go from the safest job to the most volatile job in one move. That being said, if he's looking for it, I mean, he could keep banging his head against the wall at Kentucky doing what he's doing, and he might be happy there. I mean, Lexington's a great place to, raise your family, do all that stuff. Auburn is too.
Auburn is too. Would he be on your short list?
Oh, yeah. I didn't think about him because he's someone that you just put off as like he's just not going to leave. But, I mean, it makes sense. SEC guy, come and get it.
Someone mentioned Charles Kelly, Alabama defensive back coach. He's an Auburn alum. Kevin Steele, they're not going to hire Kevin
Jeremy
Steele.
Pruitt, Will Muschamp. just go ahead and say a few more.
They're not going to hire Steele. They tried that once. Oh, goodness. Well, Daniel, I'm pumped for the week ahead. You can follow us on social media at the Extra Point Pod and on YouTube at the Extra Point Pod. Be sure to subscribe and like the video if you're watching that there. You can follow him on Twitter at Deep South Daniel. You can follow me on Twitter at Jacob Carnes with a K. That will do it for this edition of the Extra Point. He is Daniel. I am Jacob.